In the quiet hills of Idupe, where the mornings were filled with the songs of weaver birds and the scent of woodfire drifted through the trees, lived a woman named Ndali. Her name, meaning joy, suited her perfectly. She was the kind of woman who turned silence into song, who made the impossible seem small. Though her hands bore the calluses of hard work, her heart was soft, always giving, always kind. Ndali had built her life from the ground. Her parents had left her a modest plot of land and a small rental shop. But over time, she grew that into an empire. She was now one of the wealthiest landowners in the province of Ejewa. Her face was known across towns. Her smile, warm and real, graced newspaper covers. And her heart? It still beat the same humble rhythm it did when she was selling garden eggs in the village square. She wore elegance like a second skin, not because of gold or silk, but because of grace. And even with her wealth and fame, Ndali still knelt to greet elders, still shared roasted yam with street children, still carried her own basket on market days. But behind every strong woman, there is often a story. And Ndali's story was wrapped in both glory and grief. She was married to Obadele, a man with honey in his voice and smoothness in his walk. He was tall, charming, and carried himself like a chief, even though it was Ndali's name that opened doors. Obadele had come into her life when she was just beginning her rise. His compliments were like soft rain after a drought. Ndali, like many women before her, fell for the man who made her feel seen, and for a time they were a powerful team. Ndali believed their love was unbreakable, like a baobab tree rooted deep in the earth. She gave him everything, not just gifts, but her soul, her trust, her belief that they were building something sacred together. But what hurts most in life is not betrayal from enemies, it is the knife of those closest to your heart. That knife came in the form of Fola, Ndali's childhood friend, her companion. Through thick and thin, they had met in school, shared mangoes under trees and wiped each other's tears. When Ndali got married, Fola was her maid of honor, the one who helped adjust her gel and whispered blessings in her ear. Ndali had no sisters, so Fola had filled that place. A sister in all but blood. But Fola, behind her smiles, nursed secret wounds. She envied Ndali. Envy, like fire, starts small, barely noticeable, but left unchecked it consumes. Fola envied the love Ndali had, the wealth she built, and the attention she received. And worst of all, she desired what wasn't hers, Obadele. Ndali had given Obadele everything a man could dream of. Their home in Ejewa stood like a palace, on a hill. They had horses, cars, maids, and more. He never lacked. But love, sadly, is not always enough for a greedy heart. Ndali thought she was living her dream. But dreams can turn to nightmares when the truth begins to whisper. At first, the signs were small. Obadele started taking his phone calls outside. Fola began visiting too often, always laughing too loud at his jokes, always sitting too close. There was a strange tension in the air when the three were together, like rain clouds gathering where the sun once shone. Ndali brushed it off. She didn't want to be that wife, the one who doubts without reason. She told herself she was imagining things, but her heart began to feel restless, and a woman's heart, when troubled, rarely lies. Obadele, once full of affection, became distant. His hugs grew colder. His lips forgot how to say, "I love you." Business meetings kept him out late, and unexplained travels began popping up. Fola, once a visitor, had now become a shadow in her home. She dressed differently, more daring, more flashy. She giggled with Obadele in ways that made Ndali's skin crawl. Still, she said nothing. She watched, observed, waited. One day, Ndali returned home early from a business meeting in Okpuno. She had hoped to surprise her husband. Instead, the house was too quiet. As she stepped in, she heard hurried footsteps. Fola sat on the couch, her wrapper slightly undone, cheeks flushed. Obadele came out seconds later, startled, like a thief caught in moonlight. "Oh, Ndali," Fola laughed nervously. "You're back early. We weren't expecting you." Obadele said nothing, just stared. Waiting to see her reaction, Ndali's heart pounded, her breath caught. But she did what strong women do. She smiled. That night, she lay on her side of the bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her soul whispered, "Look deeper." She began remembering little things, how Fola had once borrowed a dress and never returned it, only to wear it to a party she wasn't even invited to. How Obadel suddenly loved attending social events, if Fola would be there. How Fola had stopped calling when Ndali was away, but would show up at the house for unexpected visits. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, and the picture they revealed made her stomach twist. She had given both of them everything. Ndali had sponsored Fola's business, paid her rent when she was broke, defended her when others gossiped. She had lifted her up always. And Obadele? She gave him a life kings would envy. But now the very people she had loved most were treating her love like an old calabash, used and cracked. The next morning, Ndali kissed Obadele on the cheek, just as usual, and told him she was heading to the city for meetings. But she didn't go far. She parked a few streets away and quietly walked back home through the back gate. Her heart beat like a talking drum. Slowly, carefully, she crept towards the window and peeped through the curtain. And there they were. Fola's. Hand on Obadele's thigh. Obadele's fingers brushing against her cheek. Their laughter, low and intimate, was a cruel song. The sight nearly made Ndali vomit. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook. She wanted to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she turned away and walked back out. That night, she made pepper soup and laughed with them at the dinner table, pretending everything was fine. But inside her, a storm was rising. She would not scream. She would not fight. She would not cry. Not yet. She would plan. Ndali had fought men in boardrooms and won. She had survived betrayals in business. She knew how to wait, how to strike when her enemies least expected. If they thought they could humiliate her in silence, they were wrong. She began writing down every detail. The times Fola visited. The days Obadele suddenly had meetings. She even hired a private watchman from a neighboring village, someone neither of them would recognize. She smiled more, cooked more, acted like a woman completely unaware, and that's how they got careless. Fola would now come over, even when Ndali was away. Obadel no longer even tried to hide the affection in his voice. And the watchman. He recorded it all, but as the evidence piled, so did the pain. Every new proof was like a thorn in Ndali's chest. But she told herself, this is not just about pain, it's about power. She had loved and trusted too deeply. Now she would teach them a lesson they would never forget. She remembered the teachings of her grandmother. When someone betrays you, don't raise your voice, raise your value. Ndali had always believed in the strength of silence. And now silence would be her sharpest weapon. She sat under the mango tree that week and wept, not because of weakness, but to clear her spirit. She prayed to the spirits of her ancestors, asking for strength, clarity, and calm. Even as Ndali plotted in silence, her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain. This wasn't just about catching her husband and friend in a shameful act. No, it was about losing two people she had once held closest to her heart. Obadele wasn't just her husband. He was the man she had chosen out of hundreds. And Fola, her friend since childhood, was like a sister, a second skin. They had both walked into her life with smiles, and now had left deep wounds with their betrayal. Ndali would sit alone in the stillness of her private room, sometimes just staring at the fire dancing in the clay hearth, thinking. The pain throbbed, in waves. She didn't cry anymore, she had done enough of that. Now the tears were internal, burning quietly behind her eyes, turning into something sharper. She would not let them walk away unpunished. Her new Ndali was being born, one who would not be destroyed by lies but strengthened by them. The game they started in shadows would be ended by her under the brightest light. The next morning she rose early, bathed in cool water, wore a fresh wrapper, and looked at herself in the mirror. The old Ndali, the one who begged for love, was gone. Now stood a woman ready to burn lies with truth. The days that followed were filled with a cold, quiet fire. Ndali began changing her routine. She'd say she was off to visit a contractor in the next town, but she'd return within an hour, claiming she'd forgotten a document. Sometimes she'd pretend she needed to change before a big meeting and come home unannounced. Each time Obadele's behavior became more and more suspicious. He would quickly end phone calls, close his laptop mid-sentence, or suddenly excuse himself from the room. Fola, on the other hand, became slippery. She stopped coming around when invited. If Ndali tried to make plans with her, she was too busy or feeling unwell. It was clear. They were beginning to sense something. But still they thought Ndali was blind. They underestimated her, and that would be their greatest mistake. Then one morning, Ndali stood before her mirror, wrapped in a light blue wrapper embroidered with gold beads. Her face was calm, her spirit steady. She took a deep breath, kissed Obadel goodbye, and told him she would be traveling for 3 days to attend a government land summit in Onikoko. That was a lie. She didn't go far. She booked a room at a nearby lodge that overlooked a ridge with a clear view of her estate. From there she watched, and it didn't take long. By mid-afternoon, Obadel made a call. She could see him pacing on the veranda. His voice was low, but his smile... That smile told her everything. An hour later, Fola arrived. She wore a tight gown that clung like snakeskin. Her makeup was thick, her perfume likely strong enough to choke a bird. Ndali sat at the edge of her hotel bed, watching through binoculars, her fingers tightening around the frame. Fola walked into the house Ndali built. A place full of memories, a place full of trust. She didn't storm down there, she didn't shout, she just sat staring through tears she refused to let fall. But this time she knew seeing was not enough. She needed proof, real proof. That night, she summoned her personal security captain, Chief Obele, a retired soldier from the Eastern Hills who owed her his life. She told him everything, the betrayal, the suspicion, her plan. Without asking any questions, Chief Obele nodded and placed his hand on his chest. "Say no more, madam. Consider it done." Within hours, hidden cameras were installed in the master bedroom, the sitting room and Obadele's office. Ndali returned to her lodge and waited. And then it happened. That very night, curled beneath the cotton sheets of her hotel bed, she opened her laptop. Her heart drummed like thunder as she accessed the live camera feed. There they were, Obadel and Fola, in her bed, laughing, whispering, tangled in sheets that still held her scent. Touching each other like strangers who had just discovered love, Ndali's entire body went numb. Her breath caught, her chest squeezed as if something heavy sat on it. She expected it, but watching it with her own eyes, it was a pain she never knew existed. She didn't scream. She didn't throw her laptop. She simply let the footage play until the end. And when it was done, she closed the screen gently, wiped her face with the edge of her wrapper and smiled, a smile that chilled even her bones. They thought she was a fool. They thought she would never find out. Now, they had no idea that every word, every touch, every stolen moment was being recorded, captured, saved. Ndali began her plan of war, but this was not the kind of war fought with fists. It was a war of silence, a battle of dignity. She watched more footage the next day. Obadele once again lied about going to the office. Fola arrived a few hours later. More kisses, more betrayal. Ndali could barely eat, but she forced herself to carry on. She greeted her staff with warm smiles. She sent Fola messages. "I miss you. Oh, let's catch up soon." And Fola replied, bold and smiling through her texts, "I miss you, Moses." Ndali wanted to laugh. The audacity was almost impressive. She began documenting everything. Every visit, every kiss, every lie. Her archive grew day by day. But her face remained calm, her voice soft, her movements graceful. Her heart, though, was boiling. She didn't want just to catch them. She wanted to ruin them. One evening, sitting in the garden under the moonlight, Ndali watched another video. Obadele held Fola's hand and called her his piece. Fola laughed and said, "You're everything I ever wanted." Ndali paused the footage. "Everything you ever wanted," she thought. She whispered, "Then you both shall have nothing." The next day, while Obadel was away, she invited barrister Gboyega, her longtime lawyer, to her private study. The room smelled of old books, scented oil, and wisdom. She closed the door behind them and spoke without emotion. "I want to file for divorce." Gboyega blinked. Madam Ndali. Are you... Yes, and I want it clean, silent, and complete. Obadel must not suspect anything until the day he sees the papers. Understood, Ndali, said Barrister Gboyega, as he closed the heavy file on her desk. Based on your prenuptial agreement, this will be clean. He will walk away with nothing, not the house, not the land, not even a chair. Ndali leaned back in her chair. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with fire. A slow, dry smile touched her lips. Perfect, she said softly. For the next few weeks, Ndali became the best actress in her own life. Every morning she greeted Obadele with warm smiles. She cooked his favorite yam porridge. She rubbed his shoulders after long work days. She made him believe that all was normal. But inside her, something cold and sharp had replaced the love she once had for him. Every lie he told, every secret meeting with Fola, every whisper they thought she didn't hear. It all fed her. Strength. What Obadele didn't know was that every moment he sat at their dining table pretending to be a loving husband, the woman across from him was silently digging a grave, one he had helped build with every betrayal. He would smile at her, and she would smile back, but her eyes no longer saw a man. They saw a stranger who had forgotten the hand that lifted him. And while Obadele texted Fola under the table, laughing quietly like a schoolboy hiding a forbidden romance, Ndali would sip her tea and pretend not to notice. But she saw it all. Oh, how foolish he was. He thought she was clueless, but she was quietly orchestrating the end of his world. Ndali had spent years carrying everyone, being the strong one, the helper, the giver. But now she had discovered a new feeling, clarity. It was like the fog of heartbreak had cleared, and for the first time she could see things as they were. She was no longer shackled by the pain of betrayal. In its place stood something else. Power. Power she intended to use, and use well. For too long she had played the role of the perfect wife, the loyal friend, the gentle peacemaker, but now she would become something else entirely, the lesson. Long before she knew of the betrayal, Ndali had been planning a large event, a celebration for her real estate company's new expansion. The best architects, the biggest investors, traditional chiefs and media heads were all invited. Obadel had helped her plan it. Fola was on the guest list. The hall was booked. Decorations were underway. The theme was legacy and loyalty. How ironic. Now the event had a far greater purpose. Ndali carefully made sure both Obadele and Fola were confirmed as special guests. Neither of them suspected a thing. Fola even sent a message saying, "Can't wait for the big day, sis. So proud of you." Ndali read the message and let out a dry laugh. "You'll never forget it," she whispered. The day arrived. The grand hall in Ojide City was transformed into a palace of lights, gold drapes and white flowers. Musicians played soft drums in the background. Waiters moved gracefully through the crowd with trays of puff-puff, grilled meats, and chilled palm wine. Elegant guests in Ankara and lace gowns filled the room with laughter and chatter. And at the center of it all stood Ndali, in an emerald green gown, her neck adorned with coral beads, her face glowing. She looked like a queen. To everyone she was the radiant host. To herself, she was a storm in disguise. Obadel sat at the front with Fola, both dressed in their finest. Fola wore a shiny wrapper with silver sequins and gold bangles. She smiled and posed for photos like she belonged. She had no idea her whole world was about to collapse. Ndali moved through the crowd, greeting guests. She could feel Obadele's eyes on her, Fola's too. Obadel smiled like a proud husband. Fola watched her with quiet jealousy. They thought they had won. Soon they would learn. The room grew silent as the band faded out. A hush fell over the crowd as Ndali stepped onto the stage. Her heels echoed on the polished floor. She stood tall, elegant, commanding. She looked out over the room, her voice calm and sweet. "Good evening, my people," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Tonight is not just a night to celebrate growth. It is a night of truth, a night to remember." There was a pause, then murmurs. People leaned closer, confused but intrigued. Ndali smiled. "You know, betrayal doesn't come from enemies. No, betrayal wears familiar faces. It walks with you, it eats at your table, it laughs with you and prays with you. Now Obadele sat up straighter. Fola's smile faded. Something in the air shifted. Tension crept in like a shadow. Ndali's voice grew firmer. There are people in this very room who have stabbed me in the back, while smiling in my face. People I trusted, people I loved. But I've always believed in justice. And I believe truth must never hide in darkness. She lifted her hand slowly. The massive screen behind her lit up, and there it was. The footage, clear as daylight, Obadele and Fola, laughing, kissing, whispering on her bed, touching each other in her home, in her sanctuary. Gasps filled the hall. Some people screamed, others clutched their chests. Hands flew to mouths, plates dropped. Obadele went pale. Fola froze, eyes wide, her entire body trembling. The screen played. On another scene, another betrayal. The camera caught everything. A woman whispered, "Isn't that her husband?" Another hissed, "And that's her best friend?" Obadele tried to stand. "Ndali, please." Ndali had given Obadele everything, her trust, her love, her whole being. And in return, he had crushed it all like it was nothing. He opened his mouth to speak, trying to explain, but she raised her hand firmly. "Don't beg, Obadele," she said coldly. Her voice was steady like the calm before a storm. "You made your choice the day you betrayed me. Now I'm making mine." The hall fell silent. Then suddenly, Fola broke down in tears. Her body shook as she stepped forward, hands trembling. "Ndali, please," she wept. "I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I swear I didn't." Ndali turned slowly. Her eyes, once full of kindness, now burned with quiet fury. "A mistake," she repeated in disbelief. "Forgetting someone's birthday is a mistake. Dropping a bowl of soup is a mistake. But what you did, Fola, that was a choice. A selfish, wicked choice." Fola's face crumpled with shame. Her mouth opened, but no words came. There was nothing left to defend. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire. Videos from the event flooded social media. The moment Ndali revealed, the footage played over and over. People gasped, others applauded her courage. She was no longer just a powerful businesswoman. She had become a symbol of strength, a voice for every woman ever betrayed. But for Fola, it was a different story. At work, her colleagues stopped talking to her. The same people who once praised her now whispered behind her back. She felt eyes on her everywhere, judging, accusing, cutting. Her boss called her into the office and said the words that broke her completely. "We can't keep someone like you. It's bad for the company's image," she pleaded. "My personal life has nothing to do with work." But he just shook his head. "It has everything to do with trust." Fola was fired. Then her family turned away too. Her parents wouldn't answer her calls. Her mother finally picked up once and said with disappointment, "You betrayed your best friend for another woman's husband. What kind of daughter have I raised?" Fola sat in her small apartment, alone, crying. She had believed Obadele loved her, that he would stand by her, but he didn't. She tried calling him many times, but he never answered. When she finally found him, he was in a cheap motel, drunk and broken. "Obadele, we need to talk," she said desperately. He looked up at her with bloodshot eyes and laughed bitterly. "Talk about what? We lost everything." His once confident body now slouched in defeat. The man who once stood proud beside Ndali was now just a shadow of himself. Fola thought they would be together through the storm. But now she saw the truth. She had destroyed her life for a man who had nothing to offer her. No money, no home, no future. Obadele, once admired in boardrooms and praised in magazines, now begged for jobs. But nobody wanted a cheater whose disgrace had gone viral. Meanwhile, Fola tried to start over in a tiny apartment. Rent was hard. Groceries were few. Her phone barely rang. She reached out to old friends, but most ignored her. One finally replied, "You made your bed, Fola, now lie in it." The words stung deep. She stared at the cracked ceiling in her room, haunted by the choices she made. She had betrayed Ndali, the only friend who truly loved her, and now the world had turned its back. One night, Obadele snapped at her. "This is all your fault," he shouted. "If you hadn't pushed me—" "My fault," she snapped back. "You were married. I didn't force you to betray your wife." But he didn't care. Drowning in his own self-pity, Obadele blamed everyone except himself. He drank more, slept more, did less. And Fola? She watched everything fall apart. She had gambled on stolen love and lost. It was then she truly understood what Ndali had felt, that deep, suffocating pain of betrayal. She now lived it every day. Obadele sat in that dim motel room staring at the peeling paint on the wall. He had thought he would be fine without Ndali. That charm would carry him, that another woman would be his new light. But now he saw the truth. Ndali hadn't just been his wife. She had been his anchor, his shield, his blessing. Without her, he was a nobody. He had tried to call her many times, but she never answered. One day, desperate, he went to her old house. The guards at the gate looked at him like he was a stranger. "You're not welcome here," one said. He left, heart shattered. Later that week, he stood outside Ndali's new office building, waiting in the shadows, hoping for a chance to speak. Then he saw her. She looked radiant, confident, untouched by the mess he had become. Then came the final blow. A sleek black car pulled up and out stepped a man, Gozi. He walked toward her with warmth in his eyes. Ndali smiled as they entered the building together. Obadele clenched his fists. That should have been him. That was his life. But deep inside, he knew it was no longer his. Ndali had moved on. Elsewhere, Fola sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through photos on her cracked phone. One picture made her stomach twist. It was Ndali at a charity event, looking powerful and happy. Fola's phone buzzed. A message from Lydia, an old friend. "You really thought Obadele would choose you over?" "Ndali, look at you now." Fola didn't reply. What could she say? Lydia was right. Obadele had never loved her. He had used her, just like she had used him. When she finally visited him again, he was passed out. Empty bottles surrounded him. The room smelled of defeat. She looked at him in disgust. This was the man she had lost everything for. She had thrown away her best friend, her job, and her dignity. And for what? Nothing. Now, regret was her closest companion. And she knew no one was coming to save her. Ndali, on the other hand, had found peace. She sat in her new home, surrounded by soft candlelight and the quiet joy of solitude. It had been months since she walked away from the ruins of her marriage, but she was no longer broken. Therapy had helped. Talking through the years of emotional silence, the constant need to prove her worth, the emptiness that had eaten her up in her marriage to Obadele, it had all been heavy. But now she felt light. She smiled more, laughed more, worked with joy, not pressure. She traveled, read books, painted, danced barefoot in her garden, and slowly life became beautiful again. And then there was Gozi. At first, she kept her distance, afraid, guarded. But Gozi never pushed. He simply showed up, with a warm meal, a kind text, or a walk in the park. He made her feel seen, safe. He didn't fear her strength. He celebrated it, and no matter how long she needed to heal, Gozi waited. One evening, after a long day at work, Ndali sat alone on her balcony, sipping hibiscus tea and thinking about Gozi, about how gently he entered her life, about how he never tried to fill the space Obadele left. He just brought his own light. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed Gozi's number. "Hello?" he answered, his voice calm and warm. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you free for dinner?" There was a short pause, then a gentle chuckle. "For you?" "Always." That simple response made her smile. For the first time in a long time, Ndali allowed herself to hope again. She wore a deep green silk dress that complemented her skin. At the restaurant, soft music played as candles flickered. Gozi sat across from her, looking at her not with hunger or possession, but with admiration. That look made something flutter in her chest, a feeling she thought had died. For years, she had been scared of love, scared of opening up again. But Gozi had never rushed her. He never demanded affection. He just stood by her quietly, gently, waiting. And tonight she laughed, really laughed. She felt seen, not just as a businesswoman, not just as a former wife, but as a woman with dreams, emotions, and soul. With Obadele, every dinner had been about his goals, his struggles, his desires. But with Gozi, things were different. He asked about her dreams, her childhood, what made her happy when she was 7. He listened like her voice mattered. After dinner, they took a slow walk by the waterfront. The breeze was cool and kind. Their footsteps were quiet, but their hearts were loud. Suddenly Gozi stopped and faced her. "I know you've been through a storm," he said. "I don't want anything from you that you're not ready to give. I just want you to know I care. I'm here. I'll wait." His voice wasn't trying to impress. It was simply true. Ndali looked up at him. Her heart beat a little faster. Her voice trembled slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. "But I want to try." Gozi smiled, not a wide grin, but the kind that makes you feel safe. "That's all I could ever ask." As they continued walking, hand brushing against hand, Ndali felt something blooming again, hope. Weeks passed, then months, and Ndali slowly opened up. She and Gozi spent evenings sharing warm meals, walking under the stars, talking about life and music, and forgotten childhood games. They didn't need big gestures, just presence. One quiet afternoon, as they sipped coffee in her living room, Gozi looked at her and gently asked, "Do you still think about him?" She didn't ask who he meant. She set her cup down and nodded slowly. "Not the way I used to," she said. "I don't miss him. I miss the version of me that believed in him, but no, I don't regret leaving." Gozi reached out and held her hand. "You deserve a love that doesn't make you doubt your worth," he said. Those words made something shift inside her. For years, she had carried the weight of thinking she was the problem, that maybe she wasn't enough. But now with Gozi, she felt peace. Love wasn't supposed to hurt. Love wasn't supposed to be bought or begged for. And slowly she realized something both terrifying and beautiful. She was falling in love again. One evening, after returning from a business trip, she opened the door to find Gozi standing there, holding her favorite flowers. "Welcome back," he said, smiling. It was so simple, yet it meant more than any expensive gift Obadele had ever given her, because it came from care, not performance. Meanwhile, Obadele's world was crumbling. He went from office to office trying to rebuild his image. But every interview ended the same way, with rejection. People no longer saw a charming businessman. They saw a man exposed, a man who had been publicly humiliated. The worst part, Ndali didn't even seem angry. She didn't throw curses. She didn't seek revenge. She just moved on. That haunted him. One morning, he waited outside her office building, hoping for a glimpse of her. Hours passed. Then she appeared, graceful, radiant, but not alone. Gozi was with her. They laughed together. As they walked, Gozi's hand rested gently on her back. They looked like a team, a real team. Obadele's chest tightened. Jealousy burned inside him. That should be him. That was his place. He rushed toward her. "Ndali, please," he called out. She stopped. Her expression was calm, unreadable. "What do you want, Obadele?" she asked. I made a mistake," he stammered. "I miss you. I miss us." She sighed. "There is no us anymore. There hasn't been for a long time." Gozi stepped forward slightly, protective, but Ndali held up her hand. "You made your choice," she said, "and I made mine. I don't hate you, Obadele. I just don't care anymore." She walked away, her head held high. Obadele stood frozen. For the first time, he understood. He had lost her forever. Back in his small, dark apartment, he paced the floor. Regret ate at him like fire on dry grass. He had once been the man everyone respected. Now he struggled to afford food. His so-called friends disappeared. He was alone. The silence in his life was loud. One night he walked past her old house and waited by the gate, hoping, praying. But when she stepped out, dressed elegantly, Gozi was beside her again. They walked together, laughing gently. It was as if Obadele had never existed. He ran toward her one last time. "Ndali, please, I miss you," he cried. She turned, her voice calm but cold. "I don't." He reached out. "I was stupid." "You were selfish." She looked at him. With finality. "You're no longer part of my story." She turned and left. Gozi walked beside her. Obadele stood alone, swallowed by darkness. Fola, too, had believed she would survive the storm. That once the dust settled, she and Obadele would build something new. But the world had a different plan. She lost her job. Her face, once smiling on company websites, was now shared in gossip blogs and social media comments. No one trusted her. Her parents refused to speak to her. Her old friends blocked her number. Even strangers whispered behind her back. She moved into a cramped apartment, barely affording rent. Each job interview ended in a firm no. She tried to reach Obadele, but he ignored her. When she found him at his motel room, he was passed out, surrounded by empty bottles. "Is this who I threw everything away for?" she whispered. She had traded a sister for a man who now had nothing. She had destroyed a bond built on love, trust, and years of friendship. For what? For regret. Scrolling through social media one night, she saw Ndali and Gozi together at a charity gala. They were glowing. Her chest ached with envy. That should have been her life, if only she had stayed loyal. If only she had remembered what mattered. But there was no going back now. Ndali had made it clear. There was no forgiveness. Fola had lost the only true friend she had ever had. Meanwhile, Ndali found strength in Gozi's presence. He didn't fill the silence with pressure. He didn't push her to forget. He just stood beside her quietly, faithfully. They laughed under the stars, talked about the future. And with every passing day, she felt safer, stronger. One evening, as they walked, by the lake near her home, Gozi stopped. "Ndali," he said, his voice gentle, "I know you've been hurt. I know your heart carries scars, but I love you. I've loved you from the moment I met you. I'll wait as long as you need." Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from relief, gratitude. "I love you too," she whispered. It felt easy, honest, free. She wasn't afraid anymore. Love was never meant to be full of pain or questions. True love should be kind, patient, real. That's what Ndali finally understood as she sat close to Gozi, wrapped in his abai, quiet embrace. Her head rested against his chest, and for the first time in many years her heart felt still, peaceful. This was the love she had longed for, the kind that didn't come with conditions or burdens. This time, she was ready to hold on to it with both hands. Days turned into weeks and weeks into quiet, joyful months. The deeper she got to know Gozi, the deeper she fell. It wasn't a dramatic, sweeping love. It was a steady river, calm, clear, always flowing. Unlike Obadele, who had always made her feel like she had to earn his affection, Gozi loved her simply for being herself. He didn't want her to cook to please him, or wear something special to be noticed. He noticed her anyway. Whether she wore silk or a plain wrapper, whether she laughed or sat in silence, he stayed by her side. He admired her strength, her softness, her silence. One evening they sat quietly on the balcony of Ndali's home, watching the sun slowly sink into the horizon. The sky glowed orange and gold. The scent of hibiscus floated in the air. Gozi gently reached for her hand, twining his. "Fingers with hers, you know," he said with a soft smile. "I never believed in destiny, but after meeting you, it's like life waited for the right time to bring us together." Ndali's heart warmed. His words weren't grand or flashy, but they were sincere, and they touched a place deep inside her that no one else had ever reached. "I used to think love was just a beautiful lie," she whispered, "but with you it feels real easy." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "That's because love was never meant to break us," he said. "It's meant to heal." And in that moment she realized something powerful. She had healed. The pain Obadele caused no longer ruled her heart. The betrayal that once made her feel small was now just a memory, a scar that no longer stung. Gozi wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close as the night breeze danced around them. The past blew away with it, carried off like dry leaves in the wind. Ndali sat there, still and smiling, knowing deep within her soul that she had finally found the love she had always deserved. She used to imagine proposals as big events, flowers falling from the ceiling, choirs singing, lights and attention. But when the moment truly came, it wasn't loud. It wasn't fancy, it was perfect. One peaceful evening, Gozi took her to a small restaurant by the lake. The lighting was warm, candles flickering softly on each table. They laughed, shared stories, and ate slowly. After dessert, Gozi reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet box, and Ali's breath caught in her chest. "Ndali," he said, his voice steady, eyes shining, "you've walked through fire and came out with grace. I don't just love you, I admire you. You are everything I ever hoped for. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming peace. She looked at the ring, then at the man who had shown her love without pressure, without games. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Gozi, I'll marry you." Word of her engagement spread fast. And it didn't take long before it reached Obadele. When he heard the news, it felt like the ground shifted under him. Another man was going to marry Ndali. Another man had done what he had failed to do, love her properly. The thought twisted his stomach. He had to see her. Just once. He waited outside her office building for hours. When she finally walked out, looking powerful and radiant, she didn't even flinch when she saw him. She just raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing here, Obadele?" she asked calmly, folding her arms. I need 5 minutes," he said, his voice shaky. "Please." She sighed, then nodded once. They stepped outside. The night air was cool. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," Obadele began, "but I just want you to know I regret it all. Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Ndali looked at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. "I don't need your apology," she said softly, "because I've moved on. I don't carry the past anymore, and neither should you." Her words weren't angry, just final. Obadele watched her walk away again, knowing in his heart, this time it was forever. Meanwhile, Fola had lost everything, her job, her pride, her position in society, and now even the man she had betrayed her best friend for. No one wanted to be associated with her. Her name was a stain. Her face was a shame. She moved to another town where no one recognized her, but even there, the weight of what she'd done followed her like a shadow. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw guilt. Every time she applied for a job, she got rejection. Her life became survival. One day, she passed by a bookstore and paused. On the front cover of a magazine, there was a photo of Ndali and Gozi, smiling, glowing, full of life. The headline read, "Second Chance at Love, Ndali Finds Happiness Again." Fola's hands trembled. She flipped through the pages with tears in her eyes. She read about the wedding, about how loved and supported Ndali was by her community, and in that moment, Fola realized what she had truly lost. It wasn't money or status. She had lost a true friend, and no apology could ever bring her back. Ndali, on the other hand, found herself counting down the days to her wedding with excitement, not fear. This marriage wasn't like the last one. It wasn't built on illusions or deceit. It was built on truth, on kindness, on mutual respect. Every time she looked at Gozi, she saw a man who had waited for her heart to be ready. A man who never rushed. Her healing. The wedding preparations were quiet and meaningful. No need for show, just love. "I don't care where we get married," Gozi had said. "Whether it's in a grand hall or under a mango tree, as long as I get to call you my wife." Those words melted her heart. The night before the wedding, Ndali sat alone in her room, thinking about her journey. The pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, and how through it all she had found herself again. She no longer felt broken. She no longer thought of Obadele or Fola. They were just characters in a closed chapter. The next morning the sun shone bright. Birds chirped in the trees. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Ndali stood before the mirror in her wedding dress. She took a deep breath. This was it, the beginning of something new. Guests filled the seats. Smiles and warmth surrounded them. When Gozi stepped up to the altar in his white agbada, he looked like a prince, eyes full of devotion. Then Ndali walked in. The crowd gasped softly. She looked beautiful, radiant, but more than anything, she looked free. As their eyes met, it was like everything else disappeared. In that moment, there was no pain, no past, only love. The ceremony was filled with tears and vows. Gozi held her hands and said, "Ndali, you are my blessing. I promise to love, protect, and cherish you all my life. You've shown me what true strength looks like, and I vow to spend every day proving that you are loved." Tears streamed down Ndali's cheeks as she replied, "Gozi, you've shown me that love is not loud, it's consistent. You've healed my wounds with your patience. I promise to love you, not just with words, but with every part of me." When the priest declared them husband and wife, Gozi pulled her close and kissed her gently. The crowd stood and cheered. It was a moment of victory. Love had won. Obadel had watched from afar. He stood under the shade of a tree, hidden, and when he saw her in Gozi's arms, he felt something die inside him. He had lost the woman he once took for granted, and now he could only watch her build a future that could have been his, if only he had valued her. Fola didn't attend. She had faded into silence. Alone, ashamed, forgotten, her story became a caution of betrayal and how it destroys not just friendships, but entire lives. But Ndali thrived. She and Gozi traveled together, laughed every day, built a warm home, and eventually welcomed children into a house filled with laughter and music. Every day, Gozi reminded her of the kind of love she had always deserved. And every day Ndali thanked the heavens that life had brought him to her, not early, not late, but exactly when she was ready. She never looked back. She no longer thought of Obadele or Fola. They were just shadows from a distant past. They held no more power. One evening, Ndali stood on the beach, holding Gozi's hand as the sky turned gold above the ocean. The waves whispered secrets as they rolled in and out. She looked up at the man beside her and smiled. "I was betrayed. I was broken," she whispered. "But in the end I found something better, a love that is real, a love that is faithful. And that is the greatest gift of all. No matter how deep the betrayal, healing is possible when you choose yourself. True love doesn't control or hurt. It nurtures, respects, and waits. Those who value you will never make you doubt your worth." If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful African tales that inspire and heal.